Hi, my name is Amy Cudd, and I'd like to talk with you today about the alphabet soup of diagnosis that you're going to find in your classroom. But more specifically, today I'd like to share a little with you about teaching the child with ADHD. It seems with all of the laws and all of the diagnoses and things that we will encounter as educators that sometimes can look like a variable alphabet soup. You may not see all of these. However, it is almost guaranteed that you will encounter a child in your classroom with an ADHD diagnosis. What is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. ADD, it's out there. It's everywhere. There's been a 30% increase over the last 2 decades, but if you look at a smaller sampling of that, CDC reports show a 43% increase just from 2003 to 2011. What that means is 6.4 million children between age 4 and 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD as of 2011. That's an estimated 7% of students in U.S. schools that are coming into our classrooms with that diagnosis. Who does it affect? The short answer is that ADHD affects everyone, but more specifically, ADHD does not discriminate amongst sex, amongst IQ levels. It's everywhere. You will encounter ADHD roughly 3 times as likely in boys. You're going to see it across a broad spectrum of IQ scores, from low IQ scores to the gifted children. And interestingly enough, it's some current research is showing not only a genetic link with ADHD, but possibly a link between vitamin D levels during pregnancy and ADHD. How is it classified? ADHD is classified under IDEA under the category of other health impairments. ADHD, its definition isn't specific under IDEA, so what teachers and pediatricians are using is the definition as defined in the DSM-5. And since a standalone diagnosis of ADHD does not necessarily qualify a child for an IEP, there is an alternative. It's a 504 plan, and that's just an alternative form that allows for additional accommodations for the child with ADHD. Now, in my alphabet soup, I plugged this one in. I wanted to give you a real picture of what it looks like in the classroom for a child with ADHD. So I'd like to tell you about James. But before I tell you about James, I'd like to tell you about James's mother. James's mom. James is her oldest. James's mom believes that ADHD is because of over-prescribing doctors and bad parenting. She doesn't believe in medication. She gets frustrated with James on a daily basis. All of her family pictures show James making silly faces, crazy eyes. James's mom dreads picking him up at school every day due to notes that were coming home about his attention, his impulsiveness. James's mom is frustrated. Let me tell you about James. James is 8 years old and in the 3rd grade. James got his very first label from a doctor at 15 months. He was labeled as gifted. James had a vocabulary of a 3-year-old at 15 months, and James knew all of his shapes, his colors, his alphabet, and was starting to do addition. He reads on a 12th grade level and taught himself multiplication at 5. However, James can't focus long enough to put on both of his shoes. He struggles to control his impulses. He breaks things. He makes careless errors on his schoolwork. He makes bad test grades because he may skip a whole page on a test. He can't follow oral instructions. He loses everything. James is my son, and James has ADHD. Is all ADHD the same? The answer is no, as no 2 children are the same. ADHD, though, can be broken down into 3 types. You're going to have your predominantly inattentive type, your predominantly hyperactive type, and then the most common, which is the combined inattentive and hyperactive type. Some of the characteristics that you may see. Your inattentive child, these are your daydreamers. They're staring out the window. They're a million miles away. They've forgotten their pencil. Again, they've lost their notebook. They can't remember that every day they're supposed to wash their hands after lunch. You have to remind them every day. Your hyperactive child. These are your kids who are always on the go. They're like driven by a motor. They're going to have trouble staying in their seats. They're going to blurt out answers. They're going to have a lot of trouble controlling their bodies and keeping still. And in cases where a child has combined form of ADHD, you're going to see all of these. You're going to also see increased academic and social challenges due to the manifestations, inwardly and outwardly, of the inattention and the hyperactivity. You're going to see internalizing behaviors, possibly depression, externalizing behaviors. These are uncontrollable emotional outbursts and things of that nature. What does it look like in the classroom? As I said, you may have a student who's daydreaming a million miles away. Your ADHD student may interrupt you mid-sentence 14 times a day. He may skip the back page of a big test. He loses all of his pencils every day. You may see that he's forgotten the first half of the reading passage before you've even finished the passage. Something else you may see with ADHD is that your very capable student is completely unmotivated. Other things that you'll see in the classroom are going to be effects of medication. The medication rates with ADHD are high. There are stimulants, there are new classes of drugs, but something that you would need to be mindful of is how are these drugs interacting with your student? A couple of ways to look at and adjust your classroom to your student with ADHD. In your seating arrangements, you may need to seat your student near you so that you can continually offer redirection and refocus. Using flexible seating is a great option. A child sitting in a desk is going to have a much different experience than a child who spends part of the time at the desk, part of the time on the carpet, part of the time in beanbag. You're going to see difference if they're not expected to be seated the whole time. Another interesting seating option could be seating your child with a student who is shall I say, more socially able in behavior, and maybe that student could help your student stay on task or help him with notes. Handwriting seems to be a problem with the ADHD student. Their minds are working faster than their hands. Another interesting intervention, almost, if you will, with seating is that a simple fix could be putting an exercise band around the bottom two legs of the chair. That's going to give your student something quiet to do with his feet, that he's not jumping out of his seat or rolling on the floor. He has a way to use his body that can still allow him to be appropriate in the classroom. To address some of the working challenges of your student with ADHD, oftentimes you may need to use more than one form of instructions. You may have to offer written instructions along with your oral instructions. Your ADHD student being so prone to errors would probably be helped if you allowed them additional time to check over the work for careless errors. Pairing them with a note-taking partner, again, would be helpful. Another option may be giving your ADHD student work in limited bursts. Rather than give him the 4-page test front and back, you may want to give him 1 page at a time or even a half page at a time, depending on where your student is. Another huge complication for students with ADHD is going to be their ability to organize. Some ways to address this could be allowing your student to tape record a lesson, breaking down your instruction into manageable chunks, helping that student by teaching him how to organize himself using binders and dividers. Learning organizational skills are going to be a big indicator of future success for these children with ADHD. Now, in conclusion, ADHD is complicated. ADHD will be in your classroom. ADHD may be in your home, as it is in mine. It's important as educators that we separate these behaviors that are a manifestation of this disorder, that we separate those from the child who is in our classroom and who is depending on us to communicate to them. So in this crazy alphabet soup of diagnoses and planning that come into your classroom, just know that you will encounter ADHD and that you will be frustrated and that you will find a way to reach them. Thank you.